but it's semi-guess, just by subtraction, what's left up to coarse. So we wanted to do this in urban and rural sites. So the objective was look at the effect of coarse particles, how much it contributes to the effect of ambient PM in general. And we hypothesized that the toxicity of the coarse PM was due to the source contributions. And I have to say that design was, for all these studies, the MAP studies, or this, was copied from Fleming Cassie and Wolfgang Kraling in the Netherlands and Germany, because it was a very nice approach. And we wanted to measure the differential toxicity of coarse and fine as a comparison in cells and in mice, and identify whether the coarse particles from urban versus rural sources different toxicity. And of course, we found that a lot of things mattered. So this is the ChemVol sampler, particles coming in through an acceleration plate, and then we collect them on a polyurethane foam, puff, which we can extract the particles off of. And this is the whole ChemVol that was invented over at Harvard. It has a rain cap. Now you might notice there's different stages. This is usually a grease stage where you collect everything PM10 and higher and we throw it out. In a couple instances I decided to put a puff in there and study that, because nobody is studying what about PM10 all the way up to PM, let's say 100. It's all inhalable, gets into your nose at least. And then we have stages collecting the coarse, the fine, and on the final stage, the ultrafine. And this is the type of puff that it's collected upon. So several sites we're studying in urban and rural New York and in central California, in winter and summer in New York, but only winter in California under Dave and Tim's guidance that the winter season would be the best. We looked at two different particle sizes, the coarse fine, and the fine, of course, includes the ultrafine. And in some cases, we co-located Teflon and quartz filters to try and get an idea of what the trace metal and OCEC ratios are. And then we studied them in mice and on epithelial, vascular, endothelial, and cardiac myocytes. And was it rural enough? It sure was. This was our New York rural site. This is actually our chief inhalation technician, who's an engineer, but he lives on a farm, and he and Red Boy are standing in front of the sampler back there. And Red Boy, grass is green on the other side, so one day Red Boy knocked this over because the grass, he chewed all the grass around it and he wanted the inside. So this is, some of you people might say this is perfect, researchers' results, because it says there's more questions that need to be answered. But this is looking at a normalized reactive oxygen species production. And it's all less than 1 because I used as my control particle fireworks particles. And you can see that the coarse particles had a trend, this is purely by size, of having a greater effect than the fine. And the ultra coarse, large stuff, or super coarse I'm now calling it, had less of an effect. But if you add season in there, you can see that summer and winter, the coarse didn't have much of an effect or difference. But when you look at the fine particles, sure enough, the summer particles did far less than the winter, more heating combustion particles. This is in New York. And if you look by city, it just pops out at you. So the potential regulations of regulating coarse particles in rural environments might be not a mistake, but might be hard to do, because what I found is that the Bronx and Manhattan overall, coarse and fine, the Bronx and Manhattan particles did more than my 3 rural sites. Wallkill is the farm. But then if you split this out by season and city, you still see the effect, but you see a general trend for all 5 sites that winter particles do a little bit more than the summer particles. So I could go on and on and on. But this is sort of the wrap-up slide, and this shows that for the 5 sites, looking at the reactive oxygen species in cells in vitro, and looking at the large particles, the coarse, and the fine, that in urban environments you see that there's a difference. The Bronx and Manhattan, the coarse particles make much greater effect than the fine. And that's what I've concluded. So I didn't realize how special your PM was out here, and I think you guys have to advertise it, and this meeting's the start of it. I don't have any in vitro or animal data, but I sampled Trinidad Head up here, and I have to thank everybody on the sampling team. I have a slide for that. And that was my coastal region, pure rural, UC Davis and Kent's team. This is Fresno Clovis, this is Tranquility, and this is Bakersfield. And these were the 5 sites we did a month to 2 months of particle sampling. And all I'm going to show you is this is the data that we collected. This is just a PM that was collected over a 48-hour period on each stage. And you can see that this is just mass. Tranquility wasn't that much different. Bakersfield was a little bit higher. Clovis was a little bit, was in the middle. And then Davis and, of course, Trinidad. And the only interesting thing to me is Trinidad, which is right on the ocean. It's a little peninsula. Well, the course was much higher than the fine, which makes sense for the wind-driven sea spray. But that was mean. If you want to look at the max, and this is what I find sort of fascinating, you guys are mentioning that daily has not gone above 30 or 50 or 60. But when I looked at the max on certain days, for instance, at Tranquility, they were actually doing some tilling of the soil. And we got up, I collected 380 micrograms, or milligrams on the filter, and I did a rough calculation. And you were up in a large China city there, where it was 200 to 300 micrograms per cubic meter, at least during this 48-hour period. So look at the max. You have certain days or 48-hour periods in this case where the concentration of PM, both fine and coarse, was much higher. So the work that I'm going to complete to finish off, got to do the in vitro and in vivo bioassays on California samples, chemical analysis on all of them, and that allows us to do source apportionment and simple correlations of all the trace metal and ECOC with the effect we see in animals and cells. And then, as I said, important to correlate these components and sources. So this has been funded by HEI and EPA, and too many people here to thank. I think I left Tom Cahill off, but the rest of the San Joaquin team is here, as well as UC Davis, and I really have to thank them all. And John Baums for pointing me in the right direction. Thank you.